Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar titled Financing Climate Action, Green Development, and Energy Transition in Asia, the role of innovative taxation and global reform of the tax system. It is my pleasure to host this event on behalf of the Institute for Essential Services Reform. My name is Adi Prosadi. I am the Program Manager for Climate and Energy Diplomacy Program at ASR. We are an Indonesian think tank focused on the energy transition, and we recognize that this issue poses a multi-sectoral challenge. A key part of that challenge is financing, which is bring us to our topic today, exploring the financial tool of taxation. We are thrilled to have such a distinguished expert with us to help us to learn more about this issue. I would like to extend our gratitude to our panelists for sharing their time, expertise, and knowledge. Our distinguished moderator, Liang Li Chan, and then Aoi Horiuchi, Senior Advocacy Officer at Janik, and then Salome Garnaik, Climate and Energy Campaigner at Greenpeace India, and Jenny Manivan, Senior Program Manager for Development Finance at the ASEAN People Movement on Debt and Development, or APNBD. Thank you also to all participants joining for your interest in the important topic. We strongly encourage you to actively participate by submitting your question and sharing your perspective in the Q&A session. This webinar is happening at the pivotal moment in the global finance and climate governance. The UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation has just recently occurred. This initiative was born from the following current international tax architecture. It allows for massive losses draining vital public resources from national, especially in the global south. At the very moment, we need trillion to fund a climate resilient and a just energy transition. And the UN Stack Convention is our collective opportunity to change this, to ensure multinational cooperation and the wealthiest individual pay their fair share, and to align our global tech rules with our climate and sustainable development goal. This is the context for our discussion today, exploring how Asia can leverage this global momentum and finance on innovative taxation to finance a future that is not only green but also just and equitable. So, without further ado, it is my pleasure to hand over to our moderator, Liang Li Chang, to guide us through important discussion. Liang Li, the floor is yours. Thank you all once again. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me today. This is Liang Yi. I'm based in Taipei, Taiwan, and I'm excited to join this regional opportunity for this financing climate webinar. It's my honor to really dive into these important issues. As many of us in the countries in Asia that were grappling the challenges for the climate vulnerability, and as we are having this pressure and rising inequality, finance can be a really important tool for us. And the resources that we have toward the climate actions is very important for the upcoming opportunities, including the recent discussions on the formation of the UN tax and also some critical conversation toward COP30. Nevertheless, I think today we have many experts here to share more on this context. So we have three speakers on the road where I'm honored to dive into together with you guys having this webinar. So please don't hesitate to use the Zoom function chat. We will moderating different questions from you. And also, if you have any question in terms of the campaign, why the global tax reform is really important, and also some innovative ideas, please welcome. So why global tax reform is important? I think nowadays we know that there are a lot of billionaires and also the different changing of the finance situations in terms of the international scenarios, not just the US, but also some war situations, some peaceful situations, is always affecting all of the Asian countries in terms of the climate, but also the development issues. So later on, we will have the time to diving into three thematic presentations. So the first one, we're going to diving into some wealth, tax, and also some opportunity that we can link with the global UN tax convention. And second, we will have another opportunities to even diving into the panel discussions, some minutes to see how we can recommend further the topic in some area that we can get some consensus or even have the discussion further. And I hope you can join us throughout this webinar. And we will be having a lot of learning today. So without further ado, let me pass over for the first panelist, Ali. So he's been very focused on these issues with the GENIC organization as a senior advocacy officer. So he will be able to bring us more on the issues that and the work, that amazing work that he's been working on. Ali, are you there?
Yes.
Great. I think I'll pass the floor to you to share a little bit more on your presentation and knowledge.
Thank you. Hello. Hi everyone, this is Aoi Horiuchi. I'm a senior advocacy officer of Japan NGO Center for International Cooperation. This is a Japanese civil society network working on development corporations, and we have more than 120 membership organizations across Japan, and they are working across Asia, Africa, and Latin Americas in order to pursue sustainable development and also ensure that no one will be left behind. So today I'm going to talk about taxing super rich, which is innovative idea in order to manage the vast amount of finance that is needed for the sustainable development and also climate actions. And there are multiple opportunities for engagement. So I'd like to highlight several international conferences that was actually happening right now and also for the last couple of years and the opportunities ahead so that we can collectively make policy recommendations in order to achieve sustainable development. Let me share my slide. I hope it works very well. Okay. I hope you can now see my screen and taxing the super rich. Okay, this is a photo that I saw and I took in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil in November last year. And this says tax billionaires, tax polluters, and fix the climate. I think this is quite strong message to all of us. I could see from the car that I was riding, and which says, we need to collect tax from the billionaires and also collect revenue from the polluters in order to fix the climate. This is a quite strong message towards the G20 Leader Summit in Rio. Because why? Because at the G20 Leaders Summit last year, there's a leaders declaration was agreed and published, and in the paragraph number 20, they said, with full respect to tax sovereignty, we will seek to engage cooperatively to ensure that ultra high net worth individuals are effectively taxed. So this is almost the first time that the G20 leaders agreed to tackle this thing about taxing the super rich, ultra high net worth individuals. And actually, this idea came from one report that was published before the Leaders Summit. This is a report, a blueprint for a coordinated minimum effective taxation standard for ultra high net worth individuals. And this report was written by economist Gabriel Zuckman, the professor at the Paris School of Economics and the University of California. And according to this report, a 2% minimum tax on the world's billionaires' wealth would generate 200 from 200 to 250 billion US dollars in revenue per year. And this billionaires accounts for 3,000 billionaires. If 3,000 billionaires are taxed, this amount of money would be generated. So it is a quite innovative idea. And the G20 leaders and also the Minister of Finance and central bank governors were also considering to introduce. But as you might know, as it was clearly, obvious that after the Trump administration was back in power, and Argentina president was also against this idea. So at this moment, there's not much discussion at G20, unfortunately. But last year in November, State of Tax Justice report in 2024 was published by Tax Justice Network. And according to this report, 492 billion US dollars of money tax was lost a year to multinational corporations and wealthy individuals using tax haven to underpay tax. So which means that if we have decent tax systems, this amount of money can be effectively collected, but now it is lost. And out of this 492 billion US dollars, almost half of the money was lost by 8 countries, which is actually listed above: Australia, Canada, Israel, Japan, New Zealand, South Korea, UK, and the US. And those countries were actually opposing the UN tax conventions. So they are quite reluctant to cooperate, to move forward the international tax corporations. And if we conclude UN tax conventions in 2027, trillions of US dollars will be available. So we can see that this is quite concrete idea that should be implemented. And in financing for development in Spain last July, 8 countries launched solidarity coalition for levies on premium flyers, the premium jet or first class or business class seat, to tax for these seats and premium jet. And this new aviation solidarity coalitions was led by France, Kenya, Barbados, Spain, Somalia, Benin, Sierra Leone, and Antigua and Barbuda. There are also several solidarity tax on high net worth individuals. Actually, Spain has already introduced in 2023, and there's not much confusions in Spanish societies. And I'd like to also speak about tax situation in Japan. I don't have much time to look into the details, but you can see that Japan's tax system consists of income tax, corporation tax, consumption tax, and inheritance tax. I just read the news that inheritance tax in Japan is quite high among the world. So there are lots of foreign residents who are trying to escape from Japan, but there are other stories. You can read more in the link. And last year in December, we had a discussion with Japan's MOFA if they are willing to introduce taxing super rich or wealth tax. And their answer is here. Japan is actively involved in the national discussions to address implementation issues of taxations. However, at this point, Japan is not considering taxing the super rich. we are focusing on what constitutes an inclusive and effective tax. And there's some more comments. Taxation issues are deeply intertwined with domestic politics and are also sensitive area for the sovereignty of each country. In each country, the ability to accurately assess the economic activities by individuals and corporations that are subject to taxation, and the capacity of administrative organizations to ensure fairness and neutrality in taxations are highly dependent on the capabilities of each country's administrative organization. In this context, if only those economic activities that are easy to grasp are taxed, it cannot be said to be inclusive and effective taxations. We can see that Japanese government, or at least MOFA, is thinking about fairness and equality in taxations, which is actually understandable. But at this moment, they are not considering to introduce taxing super rich or wealth tax. However, the Keidanren, which is Japan's business federations, had proposed raising tax to super rich in order to pursue fair, equitable, and sustainable societies. This report was published December last year. And there are growing civil societies demanding taxing the wealth, taxing the super rich. This is one example. The global citizens have just published an open letter to the world leaders who gathered at the Financing for Development conference. And they said that billionaires pay less than 2% in taxes on average, even as their investments pump out more than 3 million tons of carbon emissions each year. A small 2% wealth levy on top 300 wealthiest individuals could generate up to 250 billion annually in carbon emissions. This is actually in line with Gabriel Zuckman's report that I have presented. And there's also economic justice mobilizations led by GCAP and other international colleagues. And they have more than 20 demand, and one demand is including tax the richest. And there's also the US billionaire group, which is called Patriotic Millionaires. And they are voluntarily saying that tax the rich, pay the people, spread the power. You can see their website here. And finally, I'd like to highlight several timelines that was actually happening since last year. In November last year at COP, the policy options on a coordinated minimum effective standard on ultra high net worth individuals were suggested by Global Solidarity Levy Task Force. And G20 Brazil presidency adopted the leaders' declarations, including the taxing ultra high net worth individuals. And in July this year, the Financing for Development was organized in Spain. And the Compromiso de Sevilla, which is the outcome document of the F54, they say that they will promote progressive tax systems. And also Spain and Brazil presented an initiative to promote more effective taxation of the super rich worldwide. You can see the link. And the UN Tax Commission has just started in August. And the third intergovernmental negotiation will be held in Nairobi in November. But the work stream will not directly work on taxing the high net worth individual at this moment. They will be coming in the later negotiations. And in November this year, the G20 South Africa presidency will also publish the leaders' declarations. And G20 Finance Track has an international taxation working group, while C20 has working group, which is about trade, financial architecture, and sustainable development. And in December, the G20 goes to US. So we should be clearly looking at the negotiations at G20 South Africa, and also how the Trump administration will handle with G20 discussions next, starting this December. Thanks. I've stopped here, and I'd like to have more conversation with you all. Thanks.
thank you so much for sharing that. You've been enlightening us for the important role for the Japan and also the current situation about not only the G20 but also upcoming opportunity. Thank you again, Aoi. Without further ado, I think we'll pass on for the next experts who is based in India. Salome, are you there? So I will next pass over the floor to her expertise on the climate energy issues, where how the Greenpeace in India been working on. Thank you.
Hello everyone. I'm Salome. I'm a climate and energy campaigner at Greenpeace India, and I'm currently working on the climate justice campaign, which looks into the impact of extreme weather events on the vulnerable communities. And from the South Asian perspective, we are currently looking at how the climate justice is linked with the workers' rights. I'll just talk more about our work in the South Asian region. I'll share my screen and probably I'll keep my camera off because my internet is a little patchy today. Hope that's fine. My screen visible to everyone?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Uh, so let's start. I think all of us would agree that climate change is not like a future threat. We, anyways, witness its impact in our everyday life. And through this presentation, I will run you through like the scale of the climate crisis that we are already at. And then we will go on to look at how the super rich are profiting from the crisis and the government and corporate nexus that is there. Then I'll touch upon the Polluters Pay Pact, the alternative that we at Greenpeace are advocating here. And finally, I'll talk about how workers, which are the most impacted, yet they are the least heard, are coming together to demand the climate justice. So let's begin. Um, uh, just give me a second. I don't know, I'm not able to go to the next slide. Uh, is my voice audible to everyone?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. But my screen isn't visible, right?
We can still see your shared slide. Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'll keep it this way. So let's talk about like the crisis which is at our doorstep. So here are a few numbers that talk about the intensity of the climate crisis in South Asia. But also let's be mindful that when we are talking about climate change, it is not just about these numbers. It is also about the people and the as well. So in India, you can see like the farmers are losing their harvest. There are families facing huge losses due to floods, and the workers are also losing hope. For example, you can see like in 2022, India saw like extreme weather events almost every single day. And South Asia is one of the most climate vulnerable regions of the world. Although it has contributed the least to the climate crisis, yet it bears the heaviest impacts of the crisis. So these are few numbers which I collated from different reports that are available, but most of it just speaks about how like within a in every on an everyday basis we are facing these climate events. Yeah. So coming to the next part of it, like how the people or some corporates are profiting from the climate crisis, while the people in the South Asia are losing their homes, their crops, and their jobs. But it is the fossil fuel industry which are making record-breaking profits. So, for example, in 2022 alone, five biggest oil and gas companies made over $200 billion of profit. And also, as per the Carbon Majors report, just 100 companies are responsible for more than 70% of the global industrial emission since 1988. Yet, like the global south is the one that is suffering the most here. At the same time, you can see like there are trillions are being extracted from the global south every year through neo-colonial wealth flows and tax havens, while the money that is needed from the for the climate adaptation in our region, it remains far out of reach. So, for example, like South Asia is in a need of around 400 is in a need of up to 431 billion dollars annually to adapt, but it has only been promised a fraction of that fund for adaptation. So while the communities are struggling to survive the crisis, the super rich and the big polluters, they continue to get profit from the whole thing. Yeah. So let's talk about the government and corporate nexus and the public funding that is existing in the South Asian region. Let's uh, like the public money, some it is collected in the public money or the current taxation system that is existing across India or across South Asia. It is collected in the name of justice and sustainability, but however, it rarely reaches to the people who are the most affected. So globally, government they have handed out around $8.9 trillion in fossil fuel subsidies in 1 year, which makes up to like $11 million every single minute, propping up to the polluters instead of taxing them. So like this eventually shows like how the government has been backing is backing these huge corporates and fossil fuel industries, whereas the communities on the other hand are dealing with the crisis. So for example, I would like to take some of the taxation system that has been existing in India. So for example, there is coal cess, which is like a tax on the production and the import of coal, and which was meant to support the clean energy. But the funds were again then diverted into the GST compensation pool. And this shows like how the public revenue is not reaching to the communities or is not being used for the climate action. In fact, there was a report by iForest which shows that in the financial year 2015 and 16, only 24% of the coal cess receipts went into the National Clean Energy and Environment Fund in India. Otherwise, the rest of it just went into the GST compensation pool. Whereas, like the idea of the coal cess was that all of the revenues that will be collected through coal cess will be used for just transition projects, but that didn't happen. Then again, let's look into the DMF, which is the District Mineral Foundation, and it was set up in 2015 in India as a benefit sharing mechanism to ensure the well-being of the communities who are living in and around these mining areas. Basically, the idea was that a portion of these mining revenues collected through these funds would be used for local development, healthcare, education, and essentially like the environmental restoration of that area. But in reality, while over more than 1 lakh crore rupees have been collected so far, much of the money under the district mineral fund remains unspent and or are diverted, or they are used without real participation of the affected communities. So this shows that when the communities whose lives are affected are not being included in the decision making here, because when the DMF fund was set up, there was no discussion with the community, or no stake mapping as to how this is going to roll out with the people affected due to the climate crisis. And again, like across South Asia, there are public banks and state-owned enterprises which still pour money into the coal, oil, and gas, which locks us deeper into this dependence on the fossil fuels. So all of this, it tells a very a simple story, that the system is togged to protect the polluters and not the people. On one side, you can see the corporations, they continue to make record profits, what we discussed in the previous slide, whereas on the other side, the government is not only is shielding them through subsidies and other public financing, but is also diverting the funds that were meant for clean energy or for community welfare here. Instead of the polluters paying for the damage that they have caused, it is the ordinary people or the general public who is paying twice. First, they are paying through the by going through the impacts of the climate disaster, and again they're paying through the public money being used to prop up this very industries or drive, or you again this public money is being used to support the industries who are driving this crisis. So it is this two ways in which the general public is paying the price here. Yeah. So now let's come to final part of this. We did talk about that nexus which exists within the government and the corporate, and hence at Greenpeace we have launched this Polluters Pay Pact, which is a global call for accountability, which demands the historical polluters, that is, this fossil fuel companies, pay for the fair share of the damages that they have caused. So today, when the disasters they are strike, the government mostly rely on the public funds and the debts, which forces like the ordinary people or the general public to shoulder the cost, while the corporations who have caused this crisis are walking free. So our aim is to change that, and the pact calls for new fiscal tools and international mechanism to make the polluters finance this climate action, adaptation, as well as the loss and damage, which will eventually shift the burden away from the vulnerable communities and the taxpayers. Already the Polluters Pay Pact has been like supported by more than 20 countries worldwide. And in South Asia, we are linking the climate justice to the struggle of the informal workforce, ensuring that the most impacted are no longer the ones paying the highest price. So here I will touch up a little bit upon our work in the South Asian context. So in the South Asian context, if we look at the climate impact is mostly borne by the communities, mostly borne by the outdoor informal workers. For example, be it street vendors, the West pickers community, the gig workers community, they are the ones who have been impacted the most, and hence we connected the struggles of this workforce along with the climate justice work, and we launched the Workers Collective for Climate Justice South Asia. And for this, we began our groundwork in 2024 and it involved like one-to-one engagement with the workers union, youth groups, collectives, and the advocacy groups across South Asia. And it became like a platform where the workers, they shared, the outdoor informal workers shared their struggles, and we shared their struggle, and uh, we had multiple meetings and multiple roundtables with these groups to understand how the how this climate crisis is impacting these groups, and also supporting them in a lot of their campaigns as well. And we formally launched it this year, which is the 1st of May, that is the International Labor Day as well. And we're continuing our work on the climate justice front in South Asia through this workers collective. Because when we talk about climate justice or talk about this climate issues, there are no workers on that table, right? So when all of these negotiations are happening at a global level, at a global table, but there are no these outdoor workers whose life are impacted on an everyday basis, but their voices do not reach to this negotiations table. So this has been like our perspective to carry out our work on climate justice in South Asia. And yeah, we are building it through the power of the workers union. Yeah, that's it from my side.
Thank you for sharing all that amazing work, including the like billions subsidies that go to the fossil industry, and how the climate justice can intertwine with the different movement like worker union, and to really pursue the just transition for the South Asia community. Such an important sharing. Thank you so much again. Next, we got another speaker down the road that will talk more about how the opportunities can link in with the global reform, including the UN tax systems, which is from APMDB. So she's an amazing program senior officer, an organization, Jenny. I'll pass over to Jenny.
Thank you so much. Let me share my presentation. Oh, I'm not finding it. Wait. Share. So, like Salome before, I will have to turn my video off. I just wanted to show my face first. I'm not an AI. I'm a real human being and natural person. I'll turn to the slideshow. Okay, because my internet is also very spotty right now. So it's not happening. Okay, I think I can keep my video. Good afternoon. My name is Jeannie Manipon, Senior Program Manager for Development Finance of the Asian People's Movement on Debt and Development, or APMDD, also co-coordinator of the Tax and Fiscal Justice Asia, a member of the Global Alliance for Tax Justice. Can you see my slides now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So, wait. No, I'm sorry. This is not the right slide. Give me a few seconds. I'm having problems with my stop sharing. Why it's not happening? Can I just request? Okay. Yes, it is. Yeah. Can you see it now? So we've already heard, thank you for the previous presentations. It makes it easier for me now to give you an update on the negotiations for the UN Tax Convention, and generally emphasizing that we have been fighting for it for decades. And because we want strengthened global norms, standards, and the legal framework on financial transparency and accountability, parity and equitable allocation of taxing rights, and a genuinely inclusive, democratic, transparent, accountable, intergovernmental mechanism under UN auspices, which we believe the UN Tax Convention is a major step towards that. You must recall that late last year in 2024, we were extremely disappointed because COP29 failed to deliver on the trillions urgently needed for climate finance. But in year 2024, we also saw the sign of hope, the major breakthrough in global tax reforms when UN member states adopted the terms of reference, roadmap, and timeline for a UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation. That is the official name, but we just in shortcut call it UN Tax Convention. This is a watershed moment and a milestone in advancing global tax justice. Finally, the door is now wide open to reform a 100-year-old international tax architecture that has been failing the peoples and countries of the global south. We need to make the changes so that the international tax system and global tax governance truly work for people and the planet. We already mentioned what we lose, what the world loses to global tax abuse, nearly $500 billion. These are precious revenues that could and should instead be used for public spending on essential services and climate action. I'll skip this because this was already quoted. This century-old international tax architecture we already know is biased in favor of interests of multinational corporations and countries of the North where they are headquartered, not the interests of source countries. For a very long time, the OECD has presented itself as a platform for international tax rules, but it is oh, did I lose my share? Oh. Oh, sorry. I'm losing the right PowerPoint. Okay. Can you see it now? Hello?
Yeah, we
Hi,
see
Jean.
the
Sorry,
watershed moment.
You can see my slide?
This is Aditya. You shared the slides with me I'm presenting
okay,
the
sorry,
slides
yeah.
for you. Mhm.
Okay, thank you so much. Global tax abuse is a systemic issue that impacts on human rights, development, gender equality, and climate justice. It results in foregone revenues, which robs our public coffers of financial resources that should have been used for the people. It also affects our national tax systems. We cannot, even if we change our national tax systems and make them more progressive, or we cannot stop global tax abuse just by changing our national policies. It also impacts on our daily lives, especially because the burden of raising revenues is passed on to ordinary consumers. So instead of taxing the rich, they tax the poor through regressive taxes like consumption taxes such as VAT, GST, etc. This international tax architecture also disadvantages developing countries and erodes governments' abilities to deliver their obligations and commitments on human rights, sustainable development, ending inequalities, including gender inequality, and delivering climate action. Thank you. Slide, please. Oh. Oh, what happened? Sorry, I think I got cut off. Okay. So the race to the bottom, instead of tax cooperation, our countries have been made to compete against each other in offering the lowest corporate tax rates. We saw during the time of the pandemic, across the region, Indonesia, India, and the Philippines, where I come from, we saw a great reduction in corporate income tax and expansion or increase in VAT. Our basic right to essential services is severely hampered. And so next slide. Sorry, can we move on to the next slide? I'm losing you or you're losing me? But it's not an accident, no? Global tax abuse is enabled by a deeply flawed international tax system. It's propped up by thousands of bilateral tax treaties, at least 3,000 signed by our governments, which disadvantage developing countries or source countries, as we call ourselves, because taxing rights or the right to tax MNCs are often granted to countries where MNCs are headquartered. No? This is under the so-called principle of double tax avoidance. So the source countries are severely disadvantaged, but it's in the source countries where actual economic activities take place, where wealth is really generated, and where natural resources are extracted and labor exploited. Slide, please. Hello, let me turn my video off because I got a pop-up. Can we move to the next slide? Our tax systems also bear the marks of colonial legacies, which include patriarchal gender biases. And global tax governance, for many decades, as I already mentioned, has been dominated by the OECD, which is an exclusive club dominated by the agendas and interests of global North countries. There is also no way for civil society's meaningful participation in OECD processes and governance mechanisms. Slide, please. So the adoption of the terms of reference for the UN Tax Convention and the negotiations that are happening this year, which will go on until 2027, signals a new era in global tax governance under the auspices of the United Nations, where each country can negotiate on equal footing, and where civil society has historically been recognized as an important contributor to the process. Thank you. Slide. Okay, so we believe that the terms of reference that were for the convention that were adopted last year, although not perfect, is a very, very good anchor for a good UN tax convention, and we need to push our countries to stay the course. It aims to promote inclusive and effective international tax cooperation for fair, transparent, accountable tax systems to address the problem of profit shifting, tax-related IFFs, and other systemic issues. It also has a provision to say that the convention should ensure that it is aligned with international human rights law and that it contributes to the achievement of sustainable development in its dimensions, economic, social, and environmental. Slide. Okay, so the state of play this year in February, the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee was set up, and the work streams were also the work of the work streams was put into motion. Work stream 1, it works on the text of the main convention. Work streams 2 and 3 focus on the 2 early protocols that are mandated by the TOR. The first protocol is on taxation of income derived from cross-border services in an increasingly digitalized and globalized economy, and work stream 2 focuses on prevention and resolution of disputes. So we are very pleased to see that the governments really sent their experts, tax experts, and worked on the text. So they're very engaged. I'll share with you some feedback on the outcome of the negotiations on the substantive text in a couple of slides more. As we already mentioned, the next sessions, the 3rd and 4th sessions, will take place this time in Nairobi in November. So the aim is to complete the work by 2027, but the road is not smooth. There are many challenges ahead. Next slide. So in general, we think, having seen and witnessed and also had a chance to make inputs, many civil society groups believe that the outcome of these substantive sessions is generally positive. It's a promising beginning, but challenges remain. One is we still need to see a more in-depth elaboration of important principles, especially commitments to how taxation will deliver on sustainable development. There are still missing explicit references to commitments to progressive taxation and progressive environmental taxation, and also commitments to gender equality. We have called on the negotiators to look at some of the very good provisions in the FFD4 outcome document that refer to gender responsive budgeting and other provisions there. I go back to Asia. Unfortunately, in this last session, I saw very few countries from Asia that were very active in the deliberations. Philippines negotiator was there for the first week, but was not able to attend the second week. And I'm not going to name all the countries that were present. Japan, of course, and Korea have been active, but we know where Japan and Korea stand. No? They have not been very supportive of the UN Tax Convention. We have a lot of homework to do, therefore, to push our governments to really participate in the negotiations and to defend and protect the interests of peoples and countries of the Global South. What the key really that won the UN Tax Convention, the resolution, was the leadership of the Africa Group of Nations and the solidarity of G77. Although many of our countries who are members of G77 voted consistently for the UN Tax Convention, unfortunately, the voices are not heard, are not really very active in the negotiations. Last year, I could see really the stark difference. Perhaps it's also a capacity issue in the sense that it's very expensive to stay in New York for 2 weeks. And not many of our governments have very big staff in their permanent missions in New York. Japan had about 6 technical staff in suits during the negotiations last year. They would be supporting the Singapore also had a panel of about tax experts on call that were supporting their negotiators, so that you can see the stark difference. Whereas the developing countries, you can see usually 1 or 2 at the very most, and sometimes also not being able to stay for the 2-week negotiation. So we have to really encourage our governments that it's very important to really stay the course and to really contribute. Next slide. So why do we engage? Why must we engage? Because it's our right to do so. That's the first reason. Secondly, because it's our part of our broader fight for justice in many dimensions: social and economic justice and climate justice. We engage because we want to make our voices heard. Otherwise, our interests and perspectives as civil society and as people's movements will be marginalized or excluded or rendered invisible. Next slide. We engage because we believe there is a real opportunity there to make substantive changes or victories in the interest of making tax systems genuinely work for people and the planet, and towards ending global tax abuse so that countries can generate the revenues needed for essential services and climate action. We engage because a good UN tax convention, one that is anchored on principles and commitments to end profit shifting and tax-related IFFs, ensure equitable allocation of taxing rights across countries, and including especially an integration of the source country's perspective and ensuring the transparency and fair and progressive taxation of multinational enterprises, ensuring a commitment to fair taxation of high net worth individuals, and integrating the polluter pays principle will also set the tone and provide the enabling environment for progressive tax reforms in our national tax systems. Next slide. So we are at a crossroad, and there are choices to make. Let me quote the head of the Global Alliance for Tax Justice, Dr. Dereje Alimayeho. The choice before us is simple. Either we recycle the same failed OECD frameworks, or we have the courage to build something new, truly universal democratic UN tax convention that serves all countries, especially those who have been excluded historically from decision-making on tax. Countries must remain ambitious for a truly transformative and equitable global tax system that works. Next slide. So on the road to Nairobi, what are some of the key issues and asks, and from civil society? Countries must produce a robust and ambitious convention. We have to really stay vigilant on this with a strong mandate for the Conference of Parties. Like the climate convention, what will happen here is once the convention is adopted, there will be the Conference of Parties or the COP for the UNTC. We need to integrate the source country's perspective and replace the transfer pricing system in which MNCs and their subsidiaries are treated as separate entities. And instead, we should adopt a system of taxation that treats MNCs as single unitary entities. So how do we tax them? We tax them on the basis of worldwide profit and proportionally allocating the taxing rights where real economic activities take place. So their source countries will have access to an equitable allocation of taxing rights. Next slide. Another ask is that the process must be transparent and democratic, ensuring meaningful civil society participation. Actually, there's a provision in the TOR that that explicitly states the value of civil society participation and participation from other stakeholders. But we always have to be vigilant to make sure that that is really implemented. Some of the discussions, the online work conferences and meetings that the work streams had to prepare the texts were not accessible to civil society. So this time we have sent the message to the chair that even the online meetings, we believe there should be accessible and should be to civil society and should be transparent. Another ask is to ensure the integration of polluter pays principle and progressive environmental taxation. As you probably know, many of the studies, even by ADB, show that some of the models or the actual practices of environmental taxation are actually very regressive, passing on the burden to the consumers instead of taxing the corporations and the polluters. We need also to push for an integration of the principle of progressive taxation. This is there's an explicit reference in the outcome document of the FFD4 or the fourth International Conference on Financing for Development that was also mentioned by IOE earlier. And we believe that countries must then take that commitment to the UN Tax Convention, then it will become legally binding. The outcome document of the FFD4 has also some provisions that are not very good, but it is at best a declaration. No? It's not legally binding. And for the good provisions on tax that outcome document has to be really binding, they should be integrated in the UN Tax Convention. And we also should push for strengthened commitment to contribute to sustainable development, and a more in-depth elaboration of how this will be done should be explicitly put into the future UN Tax Convention, especially in addressing inequalities within countries and across countries. Unfortunately, despite our very hard push during the negotiations for the terms of reference in the last 2 years, in 2023 and in 2024, it does not appear explicitly in the adopted terms of reference, but there are many entry points in the terms of reference for the convention that countries can use to elaborate a commitment on gender equality. Next slide. So what can we do, no? First of all, as I already mentioned, we need to call on our governments to participate in the negotiations and protect the rights, needs, and interests of peoples and countries of the Global South, and to make global tax rules and rulemaking truly work for people and the planet. We need to monitor the process and strengthen civil society participation. And we need to equip ourselves with strength, skills, knowledge, and abilities to engage the negotiations. It will be a long road still. And from the timeline to complete the convention is by 2027. Then it gets presented to the UN General Assembly, and then that will be another fight. If it is a good convention, then we push our countries adopt it. If it's not a good convention because that can still happen. No? Some of those who are not some countries who are not supportive of the UN Tax Convention have also tried to water it down. As we saw during the fourth International Conference on Financing for Development, Global North countries would still really really push to water down the outcome document of FFD4. And indeed, especially on the debt issue, it was really watered down severely. That could also happen in a UN tax convention. So we also have to be very careful if it is a UN tax convention that is not anchored on tax justice principles, then why should we support it? But we have the opportunity to engage the process until 2027. And then that's another long process. So once it gets adopted, it also needs to be ratified by our countries, and so that it becomes a treaty. And that is another fight that we also have to prepare for. So now it's not too late. It's still to really sensitize our lawmakers and how our finance ministries, how important this UN tax convention is. Because after 2027, the next work that needs to be done is at the national level for that to be adopted and ratified. And then there will be another stage where we will want tax treaties. We will want our countries to review existing tax treaties to ensure that they are aligned with the tax convention. So it's a long journey, but it is very promising and very exciting also. So let's prepare for it. Thank you very much for this opportunity to share with you today.
Thank you so much, Jenny, for sharing the UN tax situations and also how the rate and how the choices to make, even to the upcoming important road to Nairobi. So I would like to have the rest of the time, I think we got a couple minutes, that we want to invite all the panels to back to the stage. So we got Aoi-san, are you there? And also
Yes, I'm here.
Sandomi, yes, and also Jenny. Great. Let me, while you are preparing and also having the time back with the panel, let me thank you again for sharing all your knowledge and experiences. And I welcome all the audiences. Today's such an honorable opportunity. So don't hesitate to drop your questions in the Zoom chats. So I will be monitoring and also having some questions with the panelists. Let me start with Aoi-san first. What are the biggest, let's say, challenges or obstacles for you to really push this work in Japan, in Asia?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because as Jenny mentioned, Japan and South Korea are exceptionally few countries who are quite against the UN tax conventions, and they are actually struggling to also finance internally or domestically. Of course, if you introduce a new tax in your countries, there are a lot of obstacles and also challenges and also opponents to this idea. Especially this tax is for external use. So if Japan introduce like solidarity levy tax for the premium airfares or business seats for the private jet, I think that is slightly easier to introduce. But my colleagues, Japanese civil societies, who is proposing to introduce international solidarity levy and also taxing the super rich to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Over the last couple of years, they failed. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs stopped to requesting this innovative tax form for their policy implementations. So we need to have long discussions and negotiation with Japanese government in order to introduce the global solidarity levy and also taxing super rich. So I think this is a biggest challenge, but also we need to have more international cooperations when the discussion is happening in the UN body. So we need to follow all the discussions which is happening in New York and also in Nairobi. But as we don't have much capacity to follow all the discussions, especially going into the conference venues. So that is also a challenge for us.
Thank you so much for the answer. Very fair. And that's why we formed this webinar. And also, it's actually a kickoff learning that we will form a network that to support each other and to have more international collaborations. And we shift to a little bit to South Asia. Thank you again for sharing the amazing campaign. And I'm very surprised to see and hear and learn about how the just transition being implemented with a labor union. So, Salome, do you have anything to add on what were the key lessons learned that you share a lot of like make polluters pay and how you engage with the PAC and that the tools that that in Asia we might can learn from in different countries. Any key lesson learned? Can you share more?
So if you want me to like draw upon various examples of how this has failed, like some of the initiatives that have been taken by the government. So I think I even mentioned in the even mentioned in my presentation as well. So like in India, there has been this coal cess which was meant to fund the clean energy, but most of it was again diverted to this GST pool, which shows that how like weak governance and a lack of ring fencing around the fund undermine the intent of the why a system was set up. Again, about the district mineral fund which was set up by the government of India, and it was meant to ensure like the well-being of the communities who are living nearby to the mining areas, but because of lack of community participation, poor targeting, as well as uh, not a lot of like political will associated with this, made the communities uh, may it weakened the whole idea of why this was framed in the first place. Maybe like for the key lesson is that if the polluters pay policy has to work only if these revenues are protected and there is and it is revenue are protected means this should be the fund should be ring fenced. Um, it should be this fund should be used only for clean energy and not for like any other way, or it should not be there in the general fund where it is easier to divert that fund as well. And also it has to be transparently managed. Unless and until that transparency is there within the governments of how these funds are being managed, the whole institution or the whole idea of why the fund has been set up, that vanishes. And also it has to be shaped by those who are the most affected, which is the most important part of it, because unless and until you have the voices of the people who are affected by this issue, the whatever initiatives you take on ground is not going to work out. It is the people who are facing this crisis on a daily basis. They are also the ones who are going to um, define and implement as well what is going to be beneficial for them. So yeah, without like strong institutional and community participation, the intent or that initiative eventually gets captured by the elites, or it gets lost in the process of bureaucracy. So yeah, this would be the lesson. Like, if the polluters pay principle has to work, it has to be transparently managed. There has to be the say of the community which are being affected, and the revenues are ring fenced, or the revenues are very protected in the whole system. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Salome. That's perfectly answered. Even providing some example. Thank you for that, and also the lesson learned. There's a question actually coming on the chat now by virtually. I think it's a great follow-up question for what you just shared. So the question is, I'll just read it. How can a climate and energy campaign push government to adopt innovative taxation systems that genuinely support energy transition rather than just raising revenue?
Yeah, I think from my experience, what I can uh, talk about is that uh, 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 yeah, so can I again revisit the question once?
Yeah, so basically how to balance that you mentioned about the raising revenue, right? You mentioned about how to protect the revenue and make it transparent and also like impacted community. But then how to balance this, meanwhile also supporting the energy transition.
Yeah, I guess revenues must flow directly to the climate action and for the people who are on the front lines of the crisis, and not generally into the not into the general budgets where they can get easily diverted. What I spoke about earlier also, that there should be ring fencing of the funds for adaptation, there should be specific funds for loss and damage as well as just transition. And also this transparency or this balance can be bought with a strong institutional mechanism where there is like an independent oversight is there, and the participation of the communities in deciding the priorities of this initiative. um, yeah, so otherwise, what happened with the coal cess and the DMF funds in India, that same process is going to just repeat itself. And also, how can climate and energy campaigns push the government? I guess the framing should be around fairness. Like, for example, what we thought, like the thing that worked for us in South Asia, it has been the framing of labor justice to climate justice, because the labor justice is an issue which has been like in the forefront since many years, and when with the extreme weather events becoming the new normal, linking this issues of the labor to the issues of the climate has worked for us to push this narrative of or make the governments accountable for all of this climate crisis. So far, I think from we have the Polluters Pay Pact has been signed by almost 14 unions and groups across South Asia, including India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka. Uh, yeah, so I think that framing and the movement is still going on. Every day we are getting new people being on board with us for the Polluters Pay Pact. Almost around more than 20 countries have signed up for Polluters Pay Pact. So yeah, I think just framing the narrative around the fairness and look into the context also. It is not that this context is going to work across all regions, but we have to see the context and how it plays out within that larger global narrative.
Thank you so much. I think you raised also very clear on different narrative and context, and also community center is really important, how to make it fair and make sense to different goals and different purposes for this revenue. I think it's really key, as I heard. Thank you again. And I'll shift to the question to Jenny. Hope you are there with us. So the question, actually one participant asked also mentioning about the APNDD has been closely involved in advocating for the UN tax convention that could rewrite the global tax rules. So what other strategies that are being used to maintain the pressure on the government throughout drafting and also the approval phases?
Thank you. I mentioned at least maybe 4 or 5 specific points. Thank you for the question. The first is really to have direct contact and interaction with governments or the ministries of finance, or in the Philippines we call it the Department of Finance, lawmakers, our parliamentarians, and the permanent mission in New York, no, because ultimately they are the ones who will also be doing negotiating. We have had also tried to interact with the tax administration here, who also, some of them are also very sympathetic. They also raise the point that the tax treaties our governments have signed are really disadvantaging our countries. No? So we have to find ways to interact with them and to convey our messages. We've written and submitted open letters to different governments in Asia. Of course, our members in the countries do that. And some of our members have also undertaken dialogues with governments. But I think we really have to be very focused now, because it's becoming, the negotiations are already at the stage of writing out the convention. So it's already rather technical. So we need governments to champion very specific provisions. So we can speak, civil society are allowed to deliver interventions from the floor. They're usually about 2 minutes only. So what can you really say in 2 minutes? But ultimately, it's up to the government present, or the negotiators of the governments, to see that through, to adapt it. They will listen, but they also need to be pushed. So there is also, we've also directly contacted the negotiators when we are present during the negotiations. So this is now, we call on you, your support, your help, your participation, to talk to your governments, and especially to champion specific issues that should be included in the convention. We also work, and this is very essential, in close coordination with the broader civil society, a very diverse group. Now there's really strength in unity and in numbers, and that's really the bottom line. So we join joint initiatives for civil society submission. Sometimes over 100 civil societies sign up for, let us know if you also want to be in the loop when civil society submissions are being drafted. We circulate them to our members, call on our members. APMDD's members are grassroots, mostly grassroots men. So we have really combined that with a lot of awareness raising. The third essential part is really to maintain pressure by mobilizing really in the streets. No, journalists don't really just look at your press release and publish it. They have to see some action, and they really, from our experience, they really are attracted to cover activities, no action. So we do mobilize to show, to pressure our governments. And of course, that's also a lot of preparation. Like I said, most of our members are grassroots, and sometimes these discussions at the UN are so remote from them. But when you really link it to their experiences with national tax systems, and when you say that the inequalities in our tax rules at home are mirrored and reflected in global tax system, inequalities in global tax rules, then it's very easy for them to understand. No? So that's a very important point, the capacity building and the mobilization. There is also an important component of our strategy, which is to sensitize the media. So we need to really get them interested in the issue. Sometimes it's not a quote unquote, one journalist said, it's not sexy enough, no, unlike news about disasters or even COP, no, the climate debates are already very popular among the media. They really follow that. Not many journalists follow the negotiations on UN Tax Convention, and we need more journalists to be interested in it. Finally, and we call on our colleagues in Japan and Korea, we realize really the dire need to really join hands with civil society in Korea and Japan, no, because they are very active in the negotiations and not very supportive of the UN Tax Convention. We know that it's very unrealistic to expect Japan and Korea to totally side with G77 demands or to totally side with civil society, but at least the world should know that there are other voices in Korea and Japan that are supportive of global tax reforms.
Thank you, Jenny, for having that mobilization and direct interaction. Very important. We still have one more question, just to let audiences know that we will extend it for 5 to 10 minutes. Hope the panelists can stay with us. It's such a very important opportunity for this network to kick off the learnings. Back to Aoi-san. This one question from Rochili about what the lessons can be learned from Japan's experiences in balancing developmental goals with the climate finance commitments. Do you have any insights to share?
Yeah, this is actually I was trying to answer in the chat, but the Japan's goal for the climate finance is quite low, quite ambitious. So I don't think there is a balance between development goals and also climate finance commitment. Japan's SDGs achievement is actually is evaluated according to the UN report, but in fact, the climate target and also climate finance target is quite low compared to other developed countries like G7, and also the volume and the level of ODA that Japan is providing is below the average of the OECD countries. So Japan is not actually committing for example, 0.7% of ODA per GDP, or they are not have ambitious reductions emission or goal of CO2s and also greenhouse gases at the COP. So what we need to learn from Japan's strategy is that keeping low ambitions, and that is quite unfortunate. But we need to have direct conversations and also straightforward policy recommendations to different ministers, like Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Environment.
Thank you so much for the answer. So I think that's the time for today. And thank you for all the great questions. I think there's still one or two more that we will note it down. And then if you have more, please don't hesitate to write by email to IESR email that you register this webinar. But let me thanks again for the three panelists have been enlightening us of the important opportunity that including the big opportunity that for the subsidies and also tax that we can engage as civil society. And then through the international collaboration, we can learn from each other on the key lesson learned, including the polluters pay, the tools that in South Asia, and how to make it fair, changing the narrative in different contexts in Asia, that we can actually work with the community and to have those people impacted by climate change to really have a say. And of course, the advocacy on the UN tax through the direct interactions and mobilizations has to show our bases on the streets and also solidarity to each other, to work on the table and under the table to push and pull those collaboration between, especially for the Korea and Japan, the continuations toward Nairobi negotiation on a UN tax. So thank you again. And I hope to engage with you more this network. And I'm Liang Yi. I will be still with the network and to coordinate beyond. Some of us will be meeting. But again, thank you all the panelists for today. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.